All right, guys, so we're gonna do this. I'm gonna make a 30 gram per liter solution, but I'm only making 100 milliliters of it. So I've got my camera zoomed in on the actual lab equipment. I have a balance here. I have my copper sulfate solid, right? So that's there, copper 2 sulfate. And I have a volumetric flask, which has that special line on it. Its sole purpose is only to be for this exact kind of lab, where the line is the exact measure. So I'm going to set that aside. And the first thing I'm going to do is take the weigh boat, and I'm going to measure out. So I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to tare it. Oops, safety glasses. I'm going to tare it with exactly 3 grams of copper 2 sulfate. Ooh, this is actually going to be quite a bit. There's 2 grams. Okay, so there's 3 grams of copper sulfate, copper 2 sulfate. And I'll just set my stock solution aside. If you accidentally put too much, you never actually return it to the stock bottle because you just contaminated like an original uncontaminated stock. So always make sure that you have a disposal container in a chemistry lab when you're doing that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to my volumetric flask. So I'm going to add this solid. I'm going to just put it on the counter for a sec, even though you're out of view for a second. Or I can move it back. So I don't need this anymore. And I'm going to take my weigh boat, which normally they're plastic in the lab, but I didn't bring one home. And there's a real technique for kind of folding it and ensuring that all your solute goes into the volumetric flask. So that's all in there. So you can see I have a whole bunch of solid copper 2 sulfate, right? You don't want to touch it with your hands. It is an irritant, so you'd wash your hands in that instance. So there's solid copper 2 sulfate here in the volumetric flask. My next job is that I'm going to add less than half, so it's a 100 milliliter volumetric flask. I'm going to add less than half water into that flask right now. Usually I would use a kind of a squirt bottle. And what's nice is you can kind of put water down the side of it, but it's going quite well with the graduated cylinder at the moment. And that's about enough for now. So you can see that it's still solid at the bottom. It's really important that you don't fill it up all the way for this exact reason. Right? It's still chunking around down there. So it's still solid at the bottom of the container. What I'm going to do is swirl it vigorously and bring it into solution. So you actually, quite literally, stir. It's a beautiful blue color. In fact, if you light copper ions on fire, if your teacher's ever done that, especially if you have a school lab where the countertops are fire resistant, you can put a copper salt down and just put alcohol on it and start it up, which is amazingly, I could probably do it with that hand sanitizer. Wonderful with the lights off. Turns a bright bluish green flame. So I'm just going to check. It's almost totally dissolved, but this is an actual technique of swirling. I see students kind of doing this and that's not going to do anything. So you kind of have to trust the container and get a good grip on the neck and give it a go. And it should be a transparent blue solution when you're through. And you can see that there's no more chunks on the bottom. Okay. The solution is dissolved. Now we want to top up our volume. And this is where the going gets dodgy, because if you miss the mark, you're toast. Sorry about that. It's a little kitchen moment. Give me one sec. It's the demonstration of my supreme accuracy. Okay, great. I'm going to give that a go again. This is why I tend to use the squirt bottles, but in my haste I didn't bring any from work. So I did bring a graduated. And I have a smaller, but Okay, so it'll absolutely rip up the neck so fast. Students miss it all the time. So the trick is to go quite slowly and not miss the mark. Now the mark is on up the neck. And drop by drop, really. Right. So I can see here that I'm just below the meniscus. My meniscus is just below the line. And I can use a meniscus reader to kind of show that. There's the line on the container, and I'm just below it, even when I level that out for the camera. So about 1 or 2 more drops of water into solution will bring that up. Now I do have, luckily, a medicine dropper here, and I'm going to do that with some water. I'll just put some distilled water in a test tube, just to make that a little bit easier for me. We're going to like top that solution up. So the meniscus, it's right where the meniscus is on the bottom of the line. And that's that. That's the end of that. So now we can see that the meniscus is actually, it looks like it's overshot the line, but it has not. And that's because the meniscus is just underneath. And I'll put that piece of paper there to hopefully for you guys to be able to see that. And that's the correct procedure for making a solution and for reading the meniscus in a volumetric flask so that you have a fully dissolved, properly made solution with the right concentration. Okay, so that's that. Make sure your balance is off. Make sure you clean up your workspace. I didn't spill any copper sulfate, but I'll still wash my hands because it is a major irritant, make your skin itch and burn. So there's that, even though it's a beautiful blue color. All right, does anyone have any questions about that procedure? No, nice and clear? Okay, so have a look at that sheet. I'm gonna rearrange us and come back to the table where I normally teach and put my headphones back on. So just give me a moment while I'm on mute and have a look at the next part of the worksheet.